station is under attack.
Superman Man of Steel is an action-adventure game that was developed by Circus Freak, published by Atari, and released on the Xbox in November of 2002. At time of recording, Man of Steel has a Metacritic score of 44, and I wasn't even aware it existed until a few months ago, so that should paint a picture for you of how this game performed critically and commercially when it was released. So I was going to make a joke about this game being so bad that even Superman couldn't save it, but just like when Superman spends too much time near kryptonite, when I spend too much time with this game, I am literally drained of all of my energy. I should say right off the top that I am a very big fan of both DC and Marvel, grew up playing plenty of superhero games and anything that I could get my hands on, and I understand that apart from the occasional Spider-Man game, the genre seemed to be cursed until the Arkham series came along. Due to my love for these characters, I'm willing to overlook small issues because I'm just happy to be playing a game based on some of my favourite characters from all of fiction. However, when it comes to Superman the Man of Steel, looking past its flaws is almost an impossible task. Our story begins in a slightly more futuristic metropolis, with Clark Kent and Lois Lane awkwardly walking down the street when suddenly this city is being attacked by Brainiac and a bunch of his robot minions. As you would expect, Superman leaps into action to save the city, and the rest of the game sees him defend Earth, travel into deep space, and even go into the Phantom Zone. I'd love to tell you that there is more to the story than just Superman saving the day, but sadly there aren't really any character arcs to mention, and while the game does feature a good number of decent cameos, the plot is about as generic as it gets. From a gameplay perspective is where Man of Steel disappointed me the most. When you think about playing a game where the main character can fly, has super strength, and can shoot lasers out of his eyes, you would probably assume that you'd at least get a few hours of fun out of this one. But it is with great sadness that I'm here to tell you that Man of Steel is both awkward and underwhelming to play from the second you load it up. Featuring 25 short missions that are either boring, frustrating, or occasionally both, most of the game is racing against a timer to take down an enemy, put out a fire, or save a civilian. Now, I understand that creating a game based on a character that is pretty much invincible is a difficult task. If the player can't die, then the game isn't challenging, so putting all of the focus on saving the day in a timely fashion is the right way to go. The problem with this game's design is that the timers are just way too harsh, and on top of this, the controls are unbelievably clunky to justify such strict time limits. Flying around the city feels sluggish, and without playing a mission a few times and knowing ahead of time where you need to be next, for some missions, Clark simply can't move fast enough, and this is arguably the game's biggest issue. Its missions are so harsh that you'll have to play them multiple times and go through the process of trial and error just so you can scrape by on your 4th or 5th attempt. What makes all of this worse is the lack of a checkpoint system. In one mission, I was tasked with putting out a fire, rescuing a civilian, and catching a getaway car. I successfully put out the fire, I successfully rescued the civilian, but I didn't catch the getaway car in time, so I failed the mission and was sent all the way back to the start, meaning I had to complete all of those tasks again every time I failed. Now, when you're not being pitted against the clock, you'll be going toe-to-toe with some very basic looking robots, and you'll be tired of the repetitive combat within the first mission. Superman has a light and heavy attack along with laser eyes and ice breath. Some enemies are more vulnerable to different types of attacks, meaning you'll be switching from one to the next quite frequently, but that doesn't make the combat any more enjoyable. The basic combat system does not mean that it can't be fun, but when it feels like a chore and not engaging in the slightest, you can't help but feel there was a real misstep here for a character with such incredible powers. In this game's defense, the one thing that is immediately evident is that the game was clearly a budget title, as even for a release in late 2002, it looks noticeably poor at every turn. The animations of characters in cutscenes are especially bad, but even in-game they're not much better. I mean, for God's sake, look at Superman run. Every texture in the game looks stretched, messy and unpolished, and while I do have to give some credit to the developer for creating such large areas to run around in, Whether up close or far away, it's all a bit of a sight for sore eyes, but I suppose at the very least, there are no real serious drops in the performance. The voice work doesn't fare much better either. At the end of the day, this is based on a comic book, and campy dialogue is no stranger to this franchise, but even for a Superman game, it still feels like it's lacking a level of enthusiasm to carry the performances.
You and I both know you made a deal with Brainiac 13 last time, Luthor. Don't even think about doing it again, because I'll be watching you. Remember that.
The cherry on top of the poor audio is a limited soundtrack that just seems to loop and loop throughout the variety of missions and genuinely sounds like a royalty-free superhero theme. Well, I've talked about this game for way too long at this point, so let's wrap this up. This is a bad game. Its controls are awkward, its visuals are ugly, its mission structure is boring, and its harsh penalty for failure is almost rage-inducing. And I come away from my time with this game with not a single redeeming quality to talk about. The best way for me to sum up Superman the Man of Steel is to say this: I think it might give Superman 64 a run for its money.